Welcome to Real AI Now, a podcast about real applications of AI in business, brought to you by TwoImpulse. My name is Marc Giombetti and I'm a product manager at TwoImpulse. And today I am your host on the Real AI Now podcast. This episode is going to be about operational excellence, process automation, and AI. I welcome a very special guest today. Welcome, Claude Egli.
Well, hi, Mark. Thank you for having me. It's a great pleasure on this beautiful day having this talk.
Thank you for being here. Before we get started into the episode, I would like to ask listeners and viewers of this to subscribe to the channel and like this episode. This episode is available on YouTube, on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, and on Google Podcasts. And we would find it amazing if you could subscribe to the channel and link this episode. But now let's get started. So Claude Egli is a founder of optimiQ and supports organizations in helping them become more efficient, creating sustainable value, and helping them boost their innovations. Along that, he works with different companies, and he's also a lecturer at the ZHW, the Hochschule für Wirtschaft Zurich, and University of Applied Sciences of the Grisons. Also, he's very active in a network around sustainable business in Switzerland. So welcome again, Claude, and thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah. So I ask you as a lecturer, how do you explain to your students what is operational excellence?
Well, basically, I see it very simple. I see it, you walk into a shop and you immediately see whether things are going well or whether anything is wrong. And the second thing is you immediately can take action and rectify if anything is wrong. So basically, operational excellence is about culture and attitude. It's about ownership, and it's about having a transparency. So transparency in this case means someone decided, and most probably this is leadership, that this is good and this is something we want to change. And this is communicated and everybody understands and supports that. And it's repeated on a daily basis. Every action you do shows this is good and this is not good. So basically operational excellence is about communication, leadership, ownership, and being able to take action.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned a certain repeatability, which is a good segue into the topic of processes. Why are processes that important in operational excellence journeys? And how do you progress in automation of processes? And where do you decide which process to automate in the first place?
Well, basically, first and foremost, it's about getting the job done. Mm-hmm. Independent of any methodology and how you're getting done, the attitude and the culture must always be, hey, there is an issue, let's fix it. Mm-hmm. Now, when you have different approaches for that, obviously. One is, one guy sitting there, is the boss, is the team lead, he visualizes if something is wrong, he communicates it to everybody and people are taking actions. Mm-hmm. Now, this boss person, he cannot always sit there. So he needs to give responsibility to other people and he needs to make sure that people are taking action in a way that he expects it. And that's where processes come into place. Processes are, in this moment, a good way, actually, to delegate responsibility. Mm-hmm. And basically, processes are also a good way to visualize what we are talking about. So if we have an issue, everybody knows what to do, and everybody can then also visualize on the process graph itself, hey, we are talking about this issue, it's at this location with this software, for instance, and we need to talk to these three persons. So basically, processes are at the end an efficiency method that help you to delegate work and to ensure the quality overall.
It's also a communication tool you're mentioning, right? So like bringing people together and getting the same understanding of what the process looks like and which are the steps involved in achieving a certain goal.
Absolutely. I was at the seminar or at the talk, and we had that one person. I was asking the question: how can we have set up all these processes on all levels? And what we simply see, we have an issue that people are following these processes. And one person from an assurance company said, actually, we had the same problem. What happened with us is at the moment in time, I took all these processes, I cut down in segments that make sense, and I put down the process. I put down the applications, I put down the involved persons, and because I wanted to understand what's it all about. And when we had an issue, I just took this presentation, we discussed it, and since then, everyone is using these kind of documentation. So we need to make it understandable for the people.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So how do you design processes and concepts so that they evolve also with an organization which is growing or which is changing or which is expanding into different markets? How do you do that? How do you ensure that the processes are flexible enough to adapt to the organization's needs?
Well, first of all, I have an interesting story here. As a lecturer, at the end of our course, all the students need to write a paper, and the paper was about they need to take a process of their organization and they need to improve it. And one student was writing about the process on their service desk, and people are coming into the office, that they ask a question or they have a request, and normally this is not written down because it's just it's not important. And she said, actually, sometimes we switch. We person is then replacing me, and not everybody is on the same state, and we send out emails. And she also wrote down what is actually the KPI. When I introduced a new process for that, her KPI was people are using it because it makes sense to them. So basically, the first thing is really to look, walk into the shop, talk to the people, and understand what are their habits. Basically, understand what is going well and what needs to be changed. And based on that, we then discuss about the problem statement. What is actually, why do you want to adjust the process? What is good? What is not good? What is the problem statement? So basically going back and saying understanding why we want to make a change is the first step.
Okay. So you really start with why. You're not jumping into technology, not jumping into automation, but really the first step is always, why is there such a process? Then what is the need for it? Maybe it's not necessary at all, right? So like it's a mean to get into the discussion and really understanding how the business operates.
Yes. And I believe what Einstein said is very true when he said, if I have 1 hour to fix an issue or to find a solution, I think about 55 minutes about the problem and 5 minutes about the solution. So basically, what we need to do more often in business is to think, what is the problem? And if the problem is that the process is meaningless, nobody uses it, we should immediately skip it and eliminate it. That's the first thing. And afterwards, if we find out the problem is something different, then we need to take different actions. And one of the other students that I had then basically wrote the paper about the process that they wanted to improve. And in the discussion, we came to the conclusion, actually, this was not a process problem, but rather management who wanted to reduce the costs. So basically, we came to the conclusion, we eliminate this step from the process and we find a better solution outside. And since then, the process should be flowing much easier.
Yeah. So I really like the quote, and I think it reflects well on what you're saying. So if you have a bad process and you digitalize it, you will have a bad digital process, right? So there is no point in automation if it's not achieving the goal of in alignment with the company's ambition. So you said there is a certain, let's say, time you reflect about the process, you write it down. Then there's also tremendous potential in automating some steps of the process. And there, I mean, this podcast is called Real AI Now, and AI is definitely a viable tool in also automating certain steps of processes. Can you, from your experience, say a couple of words on what is the potential of AI in your eyes for process automation, and which different types of process automation do you see currently being used?
Yes, maybe we first take a step backwards. I think the first step in process automation is to make the process properly. So take a step back, streamline the process, and then do it manually and see, is it going well? What we need to improve, and over time you are getting better. And once we have achieved a state where everybody says, that's what we want to have, only then you start thinking about getting more efficient. And the process automation is purely an efficiency tool, in my view. So basically, only if you have a good process and everybody says, that's it, then you would automate it. And that's my approach. And now the next step is, when you automate the process, you simplify it, and you will write down how you capture the data. So basically, automation needs data points so that certain decisions during the process execution can be deducted and decided based on data points. If you don't have these data points, you cannot automate it. So it doesn't make sense. It will be too simplistic. And with that, you have, let's say it's a customer journey. The customer has a request. The request comes in. All these points are being captured in your database. And over time, you will have an ecosystem that combines process steps and data and data points. And this ecosystem is then the beginning. If you have many data, then you will start using AI to make sense of that. So basically, AI, in my view, only makes sense if you have a lot of data, and it helps you to efficiently query this data to decide on the process steps and the answer that you need to give as an output. So having proper processes that are streamlined, and having the data points that cannot be used as an expert system, because if you have few data points, you can still use an expert system that takes very basic decisions. Now you have many, yes, you have many different data points and different decision possibilities. And here AI starts making this absolutely sense. And for me, I mean, optimizations are definitely very important here. So if you say we take a decision that is driven by value, you would go and say, optimize this customer journey so that it gives the customer and myself best value. And the algorithm will then look based on the data points that he gets for a solution that reduces the costs for me and increases the value for the customer. That would, for me, be the perfect solution for an AI.
Okay. So what you're saying is that the systematic collection of data is really at the core, because independent if you're using automation or not in the process, it's always good to have structured data in these various steps, so that then when you want to introduce AI, you can also build on top of that and additionally in production, right? So like you want to capture feedback data, right? So to feed it back into your system to improve it over time and make the process even better over time.
Absolutely.
Okay, so maybe from your experience, tell us a bit about what was the most exciting process you automated, and maybe also what was process you couldn't recommend automating.
Well, for me, my experience was it's best to start automating the support processes. Mm-hmm. So I had this team that was doing support work, and we had quarterly closings, and during the quarterly closing, we were extremely busy. And then we had some white space where we said, here we have a lot of people, and we can use them for a different purpose. And we had this reporting tool, and always before the closing, were new releases, and there was testing required. And our business analysts had like 400 test cases they run through. And here I said, actually, there are various benefits for the company. One is our BAs, if we take over these test cases and we do it with our support team, then our BAs are relieved from repetitive work, mm-hmm. because doing 400 test cases is quite huge. And our supporter, they get to better know the tool. So basically, it's a win-win situation. And we took over a large Excel sheet with a huge collection of test cases, and we started going through these test cases on the GUI of the report tool. And we found out this is not understandable. This test case doesn't work anymore. So the first step was really to clean it up. And then we found out we have a clean test case scenarios, and we went through, and with every release, we have seen that we do 4 people working 4 days. So 16 working days simply to go through these test cases. And obviously, with every error we found, there was a new version. So we had to repeat it times and again. And that's what we said. Actually, we can use a test automation suite, because we already had something like that in the company, and we can reduce that. And the outcome was we can do it instead of 16 working days, we can do it in half a day. And we can do it repeatedly, and we have a proper output. So my experience here was really take it over, streamline it, and then automate it. And our developers, they were so envious that we could do a test automation, and it was really a cool project. So basically, looking at the support process and being able to integrate and continuous test was a major step forward.
Okay. So really in the software engineering process, using the best practices, right, of, I don't know, you mentioned continuous testing, continuous integration, and just taking out the manual work involved and automating or doing that automation work in time where there is maybe a bit of a lower seasonality in the day-to-day work, right? So that in the peaks, you will have less stress because you have certain bits and pieces automated.
Yes, and the quality of the software obviously also improved, because we could always, with every release, with every version that was prepared, we could always test to everything. So we also reduced the number of potential errors during the closing season.
Okay, yeah. Okay, so that's I think it's a good point. So basically, start with your supporting processes, maybe not the core business processes in the first place, but I guess also the core business processes can be a good, let's say, point for automation, in particularly if you're building up a new company or new business from scratch. What tools do you give somebody at hand which is starting on the green field, designing their core business processes? What would you recommend you should be doing to avoid problems maybe later?
Well, first of all, I'm just now supporting a startup, and the first tools that we are implementing is simply the governance. So having a tool where you can write down the stories, where you can prioritize, and where you can review the progress is the most fantastic tool that you can give them. This is very important. The second thing is what I also see is start collecting the data points early on, because you have a need to report on them. You have a need to see how many customers do we have. You have a need to find, do we really attract the right customers? You have a need to find out whether you achieve your goals.
Sure.
And if you are not able to collect and analyze this data, you're always in a blind flight. So basically, very simplistic, having a simple process so that we create transparency. And coming back to my initial statement, what is operational excellence? So creating transparency, everybody knows who is working on what, and prioritize them. So leadership, because then you know this is going well, and here we have to talk to someone. This is very important. So processes and collecting data points is the tools that I always start with, and then you start having good habits. And afterwards, the next step for me is really to automate the reporting on these data points. Say, actually, this is our KPI. What is most important to you as a startup, and you want to constantly report on for you, and you even want to somehow show to your customers. So for a startup that I'm working right now, they say we want to save 1 million tons of CO2 until 2028. And obviously they have a need to report that, because that's the promise.
Yeah.
And currently we need to look how we can collect the data so that they can constantly report on.
Okay, so this touches a bit on another topic I know you're very passionate about, is the topic of sustainability, right? You mentioned reporting on CO2 and carbon footprint, right? Also with legislation changing, that there is a need to, I don't know, to show your values, or sometimes you get funding only if you're meeting certain goals. So tell us a bit more about processes in ESG, right? We spoke about CO2. What is it there you see is going to be essential in the next couple of years?
Well, I believe essential is especially to see the benefit. If you only see it, we need to report on our CO2. We need to show how good we are in the 27 ESGs. Then there is no benefit. But behind this ESG, there is a simple message. If you are doing proper business with a proper setup, your reporting will be much better. So at the end, when it's more important that you do something to improve it than do the reporting. And see as well a benefit and an added value. If you as a company are producing locally and making a local impact, rather than just invest a lot of money into reporting.
Yeah.
So that's the most important thing I really see, is that do something local, create local impact, and make sure that you don't ship around the material through the whole world.
Yeah, so I think it's a good point. So I think there is this saying in German, from Wiegen wird die Sau nicht fett, or in English, from just waiting, the pig doesn't get heavier, doesn't get bigger. So it's exactly that, right? Not reporting or just to meet certain KPIs, right? But really, you start with why, and then also you cannot test or, let's say, report quality into a process. It needs to be designed to support certain quality metrics, and you need to actually be serious and mean it, right?
Yeah, and if the organizations that, for instance, looked into their energy consumption 2-3 years ago, and they invested into reducing their energy consumption, or they set up alternative energy sources, they now have, or in the past 1 year, they had less costs. So basically, there is also benefit of being or reducing your energy consumption and use a more economic or ecological energy source, because energy prices can go up, and basically this will definitely hurt your bottom line. So the lessons learned here is as well, make sure that everything that is you're dependent on, you have under control if the prices are going up. So basically, ecological thinking also has economic impact, and this was very much proven now.
Okay, yeah. So I think this is all. It's very interesting discussion. There's one thing which came to my mind out of your reflections from before, is that okay, we're trying to automate, we're trying to bring structure into certain organizational processes. We're automating some. We're also automating some with AI. To some people, there's always this inherent question of dehumanizing companies, right? So like with automation, we're taking a bit out the human out of the picture. Do you think this is a valid criticism or fear? And how do you, let's say, address these fears when people say, okay, well, we are taking the human out of the picture?
I mean, there was always efficiency gains in the past 300 years. Even the invention of the wheel was somehow an efficiency gain. And my grandfather was a printer. And obviously, this profession doesn't reduce drastically. So yes, obviously things are changing, and most probably every one of us during his lifetime will see the change of his profession, and we have to adapt. And it's not always nice, but on the other hand, I don't believe in a dehumanized company, because there is always a customer, and the customer normally wants to talk and know that a person is behind. So basically, and that's also the experience with processes. The first thing is really the people. If you don't work with the people, the project will always fail. You have to involve the people early on, and you have to make sure that there is a clear message what is going to happen, because only then you can ensure that the project is successful. Yeah. That's one statement. And the second statement, what we see is really that a company has a value stream, and this value stream, if you automate it completely without human, it will only follow the happy path. So basically, if everything goes right, we will get the result that the customer expects. But at the end, we have so much change within the company. We have so much change in the environment of the company that there is constant adaptation required. And you have competition that is entering the market. You always have to adapt your processes. So even if they are automated fully, you have to see that you can compete with your competition, and you can keep your bottom line. So I can hardly imagine that there will be a company that is fully automated and without any human beings. On the other side, I really believe that automation even helps us to take jobs back into Europe, jobs that were moved to low wage countries. So basically, using automation, we can even take that back and create meaningful jobs here.
Yeah. So speaking about service center, where a lot of manual work is being done, I don't know, insurance, manually information is extracted from documents, or documents are triaged, or I don't know, people go through certain files in a manual fashion.
Yes, and that was an interesting case from Adidas, the producer of shoes, and they said actually we can now automate and we can build a plant here in Europe, and they built this plant, but at the end it failed because they lacked the ecosystem. So all the producers of the basics of these shoes, they were all in Asia. So it's not sufficient to only bring back the plant, but you also need to bring back the whole ecosystem. And that's, it's even more difficult than we would think.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Speaking about the ecosystem, you mentioned before, when we discussed the dehumanizing and that there needs to be human touch in the processes. Let's, for instance, take customer service. Before Christmas, in the world of AI, there was a kind of outburst with the release of ChatGPT, right? So large language models, which are pretty good, pretty impressive, engaging into discussions. Isn't the fear valid there that with the advances of AI, processes can become so natural that you cannot distinguish really? Is it a human or is it a machine, speaking of?
Most probably you can distinguish if the answer is too perfect.
Yeah. Too good to be true.
I mean, I'm very much impressed what ChatGPT is doing. And it helps us to get so much more efficient if you use this tool, or if you use, like I use often DeepL to find the correct word. Mm-hmm. So basically these tools are extremely helpful. And still, I have a doubt if you have a specific question on your specific bill and what potentially could go wrong. And if I could offer what is the solution that I offer now to this customer, I'm not sure that ChatGPT will always find the right solution. And I'm not sure that a company wants to hand over the solution of this problem to a software. Mm-hmm. So basically, yes, ChatGPT will be there. It will support us in getting more sufficient, or other such large language models. Definitely a step forward. But they also have to get trained on specific data that are relevant for my organization. And that's where it's getting much more difficult. Yeah. And the last point is actually, if I really have to pay for this service, it will be quite expensive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, indeed. Yeah. Okay. No, I think that's very interesting. I think also one of the aspects of automating processes, which we usually advise our clients when introducing AI, is like, okay, what's the impact of the decision, right? So if you're Netflix and you make a wrong recommendation for a movie, right? Okay, well, so be it. Maybe you lose a couple of viewer hours, or people are watching something else, or the service is not perceived that interesting. But if you have a wrong payment, money being paid out, or even, I don't know, complex transactions, right? The impact is much bigger, right? So automate in volume where there is small impact, and then have a second look on processes where there is high impact and high cost involved.
Yeah, it's two things. I mean, if your financial statement is wrong because of miscalculated statistics of your AI, you're still the accountable company for this. So I, as a CIO, as a CFO, I'm accountable for the correctness of the output of this AI. Mm-hmm. And I believe that's a very important question to to answer, because the same question we have with self-driving cars: who is accountable for if there is an accident?
Yeah.
Maybe at the end there will be an assurance you can buy for this kind of questions.
But there's a certain obligation, and there is the full topic of responsible AI and explainable AI, which we could probably speak for another hour or two about. So Claude, let me, as we're getting to the end of this discussion, so let me summarize. So you're saying it's very important to start with the why. What is the mission? Why are there certain processes? Do we need these processes in the first place? Then think about the processes, how they should look like. Start with manually executing them, then go into automation. Then obviously also scale up with technology for processes where there are certain steps who are really the large volume, right? Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, at the end, the scaling up will make your bottom line better. The more you can reuse the existing processes and the existing, especially as well, the existing experience that you're making in this journey, that will help you to get continuously better. So the scaling is not only in doing more better, the scaling is as well in the learning process. And every time you do an experiment and you take out the learnings and you adapt then your processes, your data, and at the end you will end up with operational excellence. So basically that the scaling is more in gaining experience.
Okay. So let me ask you a personal question, but you don't have to answer if you don't feel like so. What's the best thing you automated in your personal life?
I believe the test automation case was really one of the best, because it worked out so nice. We saved like 16 work days, and the result was really perfect.
Okay.
And it was a suitable case. But that, I believe, that was one of the best cases I've seen.
Yeah. Okay. Well, with that, thank you very much, Claude, for the interesting discussion and for joining me on the podcast today. So it was a pleasure.
Yes, Mark, it was really my pleasure for having me, and I really liked your questions that challenged me to the next level. So thanks a lot for giving me the opportunity to be here and present and discuss.
Pleasure is all mine. Thank you a lot. Then to our listeners and viewers, so please subscribe to the channel, right? And also please be aware that the podcast is available on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, on Google Podcasts, and on YouTube. So your favorite platform. And with that, I want to thank you, Claude, and thank the listeners and viewers for this episode of Real AI Now.
Yes, thanks to you, Mark.
Thank you.
Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Bye.